Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about when the leg press, in my opinion, becomes a useful tool. Most people here who follow my work know that I'm big on squats. I think for uh, most people, not necessarily everyone obviously, you can get most of your quad development, most of your lower body development using squats and deadlifts, and I believe that's true for most people. However, when it comes to specialization, the leg press does have its place, and a lot of people are like, oh my God, you're normally against machines. I am against machines for the most part because I think people randomly throw machines and attempt to isolate muscles and everything just as like a kitchen sink approach, and I just don't believe in that sort of concept. That I don't believe it's actually necessary to isolate every muscle. I don't think every person out there will benefit from using machines at all. People frequently use them as part of their training, and like with anything else, they're still potentially valuable tools in the right context. And that's the thing that we need to remember. Ultimately, when we're talking about training and different lifts and exercises, they're all just tools in a toolbox. They all have their roles. Some of them are useful for multiple roles. They're just tools, though, ultimately. And the leg press, does it have its place? Sure, absolutely. I mean, I have Brittany leg press 3 days a week right now. But I don't have a single program out there with the leg press written as a primary exercise. I don't, because I don't think any novice, for the most part, really needs to be doing a leg press. I think leg press falls into the area of training specialization. I think it's useful as a secondary leg building exercise, and I think it's useful for certain performance elements on the deadlift for power lifters. Now, the reason Brittany's using it is the reason I think for most people it becomes useful. And that ultimately comes down to the fact of what if you need faster leg development than you're currently able to get with squats. Because that's ultimately when we come down to is specialization training. And that's where leg press shines. It's specialization training, meaning you have a weak lift or a weak body part that you want to make the primary focus of your training, meaning it becomes the focus of 60 or 70% or more of your training. In my case, for a while, that was the overhead press. 50% of my training every week comprised a variation to the overhead press. 50%. Some of my accessories carried over to the overhead press too. So that being said, it became a priority. In someone like Brittany's case, 80+% of her training is lower body oriented. Not saying it doesn't have some upper body components, but it is. Here's the problem we run into. Things like squats, as long as you can recover from them, will always be fantastic lower body builders. People say, well, another exercise can do just as much. Sure it can, but the squat gives you other things, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. No one goes to the gym exclusively for the purpose of growing bigger legs, right? No one does only that, unless you don't have arms, like maybe someone who's had their arms amputated might, but that's a special exception, isn't it? In other words, every one of us go to the gym for more than one reason, meaning we might actually want to get stronger. We might actually want to improve our cholesterol. We might actually want certain health benefits. We might want certain performance benefits from going to the gym, meaning if any person can go to the gym and put in X amount of work, but they also, instead of just getting Y result, they get Z as an added bonus, are they ever going to turn down Z as an added bonus? If they got it for the same amount of work, it's literally like going to a job and saying they say, hey, you can work X amount of hours in this office doing this type of work, but if you work on this project, we're going to give you $25 an hour. But if you work on this other project, we're going to give you $25 an hour, plus we're going to give you better medical benefits and 401k. All right, now you wanted the job originally just because you wanted the $25 an hour. But are you going to turn down the 401k and the better medical benefits when they're thrown in as an added bonus? And that's the way we look at a squat. A squat can create maximum leg stimulation in a workout. Of course it can. It has other carryover benefits because it's a full body exercise. It has performance benefits and muscular benefits that carry over beyond just making your legs bigger. That's why it's a superior exercise, because it's capable of stimulating maximum quad hypertrophy, hip hypertrophy, things like that. It has the capacity to do so with added benefits, added perks, and those added perks are the reason so many athletes use this exercise. Whereas in the leg press, it's just building your legs. All right. and most of us understand that. Here's what it comes down to. The squat is an axial loading exercise, and the back squat more so than the front squat, and the low bar squat more so than the high bar squat. In other words, axial loading is the amount of downward force put on your spine. Right? The more downward force you put on your spine, that alone actually you have to recover from. It has a separate set of recovery from your actual lifting. In other words, if you could squat 300 pounds, but you did walkouts with 500 pounds loaded on your shoulders and you didn't even squat it, but you walked it out of the rack 10 times a day, that would start mounting up on your recovery real fast. That would negatively impact your recovery, and your training volume would drop. You wouldn't be able to train nearly as much. Axial loading itself with relatively heavy weight, or time spent under load with your spine compressed with any given amount of weight, think about it in terms of maybe seconds times pounds put on you. All right, axial loading, you have a nervous system recovery element to that. And if that recovery doesn't happen, your strength starts to regress. Meaning when it gets pushed too far for too long, you don't ever get enough recovery time from that, your strength will start to go down. All right. So that being said, when you understand that, I think it starts to become apparent that what happens if we want to specialize in leg growth as a higher priority over everything else. We can do a lot of squatting, and we should do a lot of squatting, right? That's our first go-to exercise for lower body development. Squat variations. At a certain point, the amount of volume that you could probably train with and stimulate growth with, if your goal was to let other systems in your body not grow so much, like you let your upper body just lag for a bit. You might only come in and spend 30 minutes a week working on your upper body or less and focus on the lower body. You can generate a lot of volume with that. Especially if you start focusing on higher volume work, doing multiple sets, higher reps, you can do a lot of volume. In fact, you can reach a volume threshold if you're going to do it 5 or 6 days a week. You can reach a threshold to where your axial loading becomes excessive, because at a certain point, most people can't handle more than about 5 sets of squats 3 times a week. You start trying to exceed about 14 or 15 sets of squats a week, most people are going to struggle to start recovering from that. Well, what if you want more than 15 sets for your legs, especially when you're doing deadlifting and stuff with it too? And you're like, but I want to get more volume in. That's where the leg press becomes useful, because there's no reason you can't do another 9, 12, 10, 15 sets of leg press every week to add additional metabolic fatigue. All right, now your legs have to recover from that. Even your peripheral nervous system has to recover from that, but you're doing so without any additional axial loading. So the trick is, if you're going to do something like this and you want to specialize specifically in your lower body, you still need to do axial loading exercises, because you need those for overall strength benefits. There's a lot of benefits to doing this. You need these exercises. But for a specialization program, as you guys, when you think about it, you can do enough squatting and deadlifting to where the axial loading starts to become a recovery problem. When that happens, one of the first things people do is obviously go to deficit deadlifts, less axial loading, more hamstring activation. Front squats, less axial loading, same quad activation, right? But eventually that's going to stop working too, because again, you still have more volume left. So if you reel those back in a hair and you say, okay, I'm not going to push my max axial loading exercises to their limit, I'm going to bring them in a hair, that leaves your systematic recovery more room, which means you can do more volume on, say, a lower body specific exercise like the leg press. And this is where it shines. It doesn't have axial loading. So once you know that you're nearing your maximum recoverable fatigue in terms of axial loading, you can only handle so much squatting and deadlifting. Then the leg press starts to shine when you say, but I want to get more leg growth, and I'm willing to put in an extra hour or 2 of leg workouts every week if I can get 5% faster gains in my legs or 10% faster gains in my legs. I want to specialize in them. Well, the leg press shines at that point, because you can simply handle more volume of it and still recover. You can add it in as an accessory for metabolic fatigue as a high rep, moderate weight exercise that isn't going to beat up your whole system as much, and it becomes useful there. Now, a lot of people say, well, why don't you just do the leg press instead in general? because you can actually handle a fair amount of squatting and deadlifting before it becomes a recovery issue. So why wouldn't you? You get other benefits besides just the legs. The main issue, though, is balancing everything out. And at a certain threshold, there's a threshold to where you go, okay, if I want to specialize in my leg training for a while, my legs can handle more volume than my spine can handle loading. So I'm going to start utilizing the leg press to increase that volume instead of just adding another 5 or 10 sets of squats every week. And in that context, it starts to really make sense where the leg press becomes a useful exercise at that point. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.